Hello. I know it's raining, but let's go for a walk anyway. This month I'd like to start by telling you the story as I understand it. So the first part of this video is an opinion piece. In the second half, we will have a look at the results for the opinion polls conducted in Russia by the Levada Center. Once upon a time, Russia went to war, but the war was not going well, and Putin decided to call on his friend of 20 years, Prigozhin, to help out in Ukraine. Prigozhin got the Wagner Group on the ground in Ukraine, and at home he started a recruitment campaign for more soldiers. Roll forward to June of this year, and Prigozhin has had enough. He's losing men and money. On top of it, Shoigu, who has been a bit of a thorn in his side since he became the defense minister, is not keeping the Wagner fighters resupplied with ammunition. When reports of Wagner fighters being mistakenly attacked by the regular army start flooding in, Prigozhin seems to decide that enough is enough. He starts for Moscow with a contingent of Wagnerites on the so-called March for Justice. And as soon as this, let's call it a mini rebellion, starts, it ends. After the dust settled a bit, Prigozhin has a meeting with Putin, where he reassures him, his old friend, that he's still absolutely loyal to him, and all is well again. Well, sort of. 2 months later, Prigozhin's jet explodes mid-flight. All souls on board are lost. Among the victims are Prigozhin himself and Utkin. Both men are laid to rest in very private funerals. Prigozhin, the man with the money, and Utkin, the man with the know-how, are gone. But the Wagner Group is a fully functioning company, and I believe that it will keep going all the time there is work from military contractors. The rumor mill points to the Kremlin being behind the crash, although, at least in the last few years, the preference has been for poison or treacherous windows. An explosion is a bit flashy. In recent times, explosions have occurred and have taken the lives of Mr. Tatarsky and Miss Dugina. Both were considered ultranationalists, but they were not in the same league as Prigozhin and Utkin. It is apparent that both Prigozhin and Utkin must have believed themselves quite safe. They flew into Moscow and then boarded the same plane to St. Petersburg. I cannot say anything about a possible active participation by the Kremlin in the crash, but would say that it is likely that the Kremlin withdrew its protection from the two men. Thus the passing of Prigozhin changes how the war is going? I don't think so, but things have changed. At the beginning of the war, Ukrainian allies, such as the United States, held the position that they would help Ukraine fight the Russian army in Ukrainian territory, but were against Ukrainian incursions into Russian territory. That has changed. The Ukrainian government would not have publicly acknowledged that they are using drones to disrupt military supply chains inside Russia and are striking deep into Russian territory if that would have jeopardized their relationship with the United States. According to commentators on Deutsche Welle and France 24, the aims of the drone attacks, beyond disrupting military supplies, are to make the war more than a short report on the evening news for Russians, as well as undermine the Kremlin by showing that it cannot protect the population or effectively defend Russian borders. The question is, will the drone attacks undermine the Kremlin? So far, the opinion poll results show strong support for Mr. Putin and the government, and you prefer anecdotal evidence. A vox pop conducted by 1420, links to their video below, indirectly confirms the Levada Center findings, and it is very likely that should Mr. Putin run in next year's election, he will win again. So returning to my initial question, is there any end in sight for the war? At the moment, I cannot say. Mr. Putin appears to be set on keeping the war going. Yes, the cats are fighting. It is always possible that the infighting and horse trading that is part and parcel of politics everywhere may result in Mr. Putin being pushed out, although not very likely, and it is not a given that a more moderate faction would take over as opposed to the ultranationalist one. Weirdly enough, Mr. Putin's group is somewhere in the middle, keeping in check the other factions. Although Mr. Putin looks, to me at least, in fairly good health, he will be 71 years old in October, and there may be a need to start looking for a successor in the not-too-distant future. High approval ratings or not, it is always better to face election with a few victories under your belt, which means more fighting, more bombing, more attacks, and more misery all round. On the other side, Ukraine needs some victories of her own. Ukraine is dependent on international aid to continue fighting. The longer the war goes on, the harder it is for Ukraine to get the resources she needs. And elections are coming up in the United States next year, and it is not a given that the next US government will be willing to support Ukraine to the same degree as the current one. Personal opinion time over. Let's look at the opinion polls results. Mr. Putin's approval ratings are solid. The government's approval rating are overall good. But the indicator I like to look at the most to get an idea of how people feel in the country is this one. Overall, people seem to feel that the country is moving in the right direction. The implication is that so far people are more or less alright with how the country is being governed. Going on the fact that at the time of Prigozhin's march on Moscow, the opinion polls showed an increase in negative responses and an increase in uncertainty, I would say that at least for most of August, uncertainty levels were fairly low. So that is the end of the update for this month. But I have to tell you that recently I have begun to think that I could turn current events into the building blocks of a good old school Cold War noir-style detective story. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and if you'd be interested in that. As always, thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.